Hey guys, this is yet to be our most controversial podcast yet. Today we're talking about self-improvement, this idea of the Manosphere, and this idea of Jeffrey versus Adonis. I have two very special guests on here today, and this is of course the Empty Cup Podcast, episode 6. Right? It's 6.
I hope so.
Yeah. We got Nathaniel, who will be representing Adonis.
What's up, guys?
And then we got Jeff. We got Jeffrey. We have Duncan representing this idea of Jeffrey. And I just want to make a disclaimer that both of these guys aren't exactly the cliche archetypes of Adonis and Jeffrey, but they're playing devil's advocate of both sides. So, for example, Nathaniel might not have all the views that Adonis might have, and Duncan might not have all the views that Jeffrey would have. But he's just playing devil's advocate for the sake of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And if you guys want to introduce yourselves a little bit, Duncan, you can go first. You're the new guest.
Fine. Hi, I'm Duncan. What do you want me to say?
And you're gonna. Oh yeah, you finished your.
I just finished my undergrad at Tech in industrial engineering. I do my master's in analytics. I'm actually an international student from Germany and Indonesia, and I've lived in a lot of different places in the world. Had some cool experiences along the way, hopefully.
Yeah, we actually met at kind of just like a networking barbecue kind of thing. And for a long time, I didn't know, I knew you from somewhere, but I couldn't figure out where. And actually, apparently, he's good friends with my former roommate, Nelson, so that's pretty cool.
Finally figured that one out.
And when we were talking about self-improvement things at the barbecue, I noticed that you had a lot of different views about all these different ideas, especially the more controversial, slightly based views, I'd say, on masculinity.
Dare I say based in red pill?
Red pill views. We'll get into all of that. So I thought it'd be really interesting to have you on here. And then Nathaniel, you're kind of representing this idea, I wouldn't say manosphere kind of side of this, I'd say just the more self-improvement aligned side of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And maybe you want to go ahead and just briefly explain, Jeffrey.
Oh yeah, we'll get into all the terms.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, for sure.
We have a glossary.
We have a glossary. There'll be an index in the bio, or the, description. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's get into it. I guess we can first talk about this idea of self-improvement is kind of, I think it's mostly for young men, right? I'd say the self-improvement movement has been mostly young men, and I think a small minority of them are on this scale of maybe being red pill or black pill even. So I guess what is this idea of red pill and black pill? You guys want to explain it?
So what you're speaking about, because there's different, I guess, layers to each of this. So within, the self-improvement internet space, you have the manosphere, and within the manosphere space, you have the red pill, and then further, the more extreme you get, then eventually you find yourself in black pill type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, we'll bring it back up to the manosphere, and that is just as far as I understand it, a space on the internet where the majority of young men are listening to certain, I guess, figureheads or leaders talk about very traditional gender roles, hypergamy, sexual market value, doing intense things like monk mode, dopamine detox, all to kind of level up yourself and ultimately increase. It all boils down to pretty much increasing your chances with women and improving your quality of life.
Yeah, I guess this whole idea of the manosphere, self-improvement, everything, we're all trying to find love. I think that's the sad reality. Is some people are having it harder or going about it differently in their life, and everyone just has different circumstances in life. And I think that's why we all try to cope or deal with our issues in different ways, and that's why you have all of these ideas of the manosphere and all these toxic ideas essentially coming up, and then I think healthier ideas in terms of self-improvement that are also existing But I think they all get bundled up into the manosphere, which is kind of my problem with it, is that when you talk about the manosphere, I'm just looking at the Wikipedia definition of it right now.
Nice.
And it includes everything from anything concerning masculinity or men's issues, right? And there's a lot of like toxic aspects of that. Like there's a lot, like, you know, you talk about incels, you talk about anti-feminists, what else we got in here? I don't even know what these acronyms mean, MRM, pickup artists.
Which aren't bad, I guess, but kind of sleazy, you know?
They're very sleazy, and I think their view on women is just kind of very shallow.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, what you touched on earlier, and I guess I'll go into this more later, but the whole thing where like the manosphere is focused on like helping guys find women, it's like sort of something I have a problem with, because really like you should be improving yourself for the sake of that, right?
Right.
And then like if you want to pursue love, that's something you'll find once you're able to like fully love and appreciate yourself.
Right. So I guess the manosphere, it's kind of a derogatory term that's been created by, I don't know, I guess more of the feminist side, I'd say, or I guess just the anti. I don't even know who created it.
I'm pretty sure it's like a term that was kind of coined by the left.
Yeah.
And it's mainly used in a derogatory sense.
Right.
To like a space where you find usually like more conservative white men.
But I'd say within that you have all like the red pill, the black pill, but even like I'd say the guys that actually genuinely just want to improve themselves kind of get bundled into this category, and that's I think where we want to be, because I mean for us it's like we really just want the benefits of like getting to being our best self essentially, and I think that's a lot of the values that self-improvement has within it. But I guess everyone's mindset on like why are you doing this, like why are you trying to improve yourself, it's usually like you said aligned with like, oh, I want to attract women or be successful or whatever, and so that's why I think it gets bundled together, because at the end of the day it's all catered towards these young men, and they're very impressionable, and that's why we can talk about like all these like self-improvement YouTubers, like, and all social media influencers. Are they actually doing good, or are they just manipulating their audiences to make more money? But I guess we can talk about this idea of Jeffrey versus Adonis. It's in the title, right? So like, to you guys, I mean, you're Jeffrey. What? I guess I should ask you what Jeffrey means, and I should ask you what Adonis means, because you're the opposites. I think that'd be more interesting.
The way...
So yeah, what's Jeffrey mean?
Well, so at least this Jeffrey versus Adonis concept, it's something that was coined by a YouTuber by the name of Hamza, and that's ultimately like the YouTuber who kind of exposed Govan and myself to like the self-improvement realm on the internet, and kind of like started this journey that sparked things like starting this podcast. And so pretty much it boils down to instant versus delayed gratification, where Jeffrey, and the way I'm explaining this is going to sound derogatory to you. We're not trying to make it so.
But again, he's not Jeffrey. He's just representing.
Yeah, we're discussing like the pros and cons of like both of these mindsets or like perspectives of how to like live your life. And so it's all about instant versus delayed gratification. And Jeffrey represents pretty much like the guy who just indulges in every single form of instant gratification, whether that's like drinking, binge eating, jerking off, video games. And
even like scrolling your phones,
social media is
big nowadays. Yeah.
And then Adonis represents like everything that's delayed gratification, like dopamine detoxes, being entrepreneurial and like working on your own business and creating a life for yourself, and
spending time in nature.
Yeah, spending time in meditation, reading, journaling, all that stuff to, I guess, make you
quality social time.
Yeah.
Your tribe, improving your tribe.
Exactly.
High quality men and women. I mean, I don't know if you disagree with any of that or have a different view or like that. Anything.
I'd say that's pretty accurate, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And yeah. So I guess, how do you guys think this term of like manosphere came to be? Do you think it like derived from like the baddest of the bunch, kind of like your black pillars, your incels, maybe even the red pillars that have a derogatory view of women?
I think usually when a term comes up to generalize a group of people, it's typically derived from the extremes. Like, you're never gonna see someone look at a group of people and there's like a few radical people, and most of them are moderate, and people are gonna be like, ah, yes, the moderate faction. People always try to go for like the more extreme thing. It gets you more clicks, more views. If it's a, you know, article or something, it will get you more citations and journal reviews and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I definitely agree it came from like the more extreme elements.
Yeah, for sure. I can go ahead. What I wanted to respond to that is like, yeah, I think a lot when I watch like Hamza's videos is like, how much does he actually believe this, or is he just trying to be more radical? Because I think you have to take a radical stance in order to get views and in order for you to reach more of an audience, because you really have to polarize yourself to be more popular. And that actually brings another YouTuber up to mind, Andrew Tate. I think you were going to mention this. It seemed like you were. For any of you who don't know who Andrew Tate is, I'm sure a majority of you don't know who Andrew Tate is. I hope you know. He's kind of like dominating YouTube and social media right now. I feel like he's on everyone's. You said you saw him too, right? Yeah, he's a former, I think 4-time kickboxing champion, but he's a big guy on like being a top G, as he says. Yeah. This idea of like an alpha male, total like red pill, I'd say almost. And I guess like the most polarizing view that he has is that like his idea that like men and women are not the same, and like being born a man is like the ultimate card. And it's I think he buys into the whole SMB. We'll get into that idea, and that I guess he just, a lot of his views are kind of very misogynistic in a way, or at least some people would say are misogynistic. I'd say I agree with that. Some people say that.
I'd say you have to be pretty far into the Manosphere.
No, I'm trying to be neutral. I'm trying to be neutral here. I'm trying to be neutral here, but I should say no. I just don't agree with a lot of the things that he says. And I'm starting to lose track of what I was trying to bring up here. But I guess I'd say that when I watch his content, I think that a lot of what he says is mostly for the views. I'm not sure how much of it he actually believes, because I know for a fact that it's working for him, because he's popping off everywhere on YouTube. And I think it's just because he's manipulating the audience. Especially he's working towards triggering an audience of younger men who are probably frustrated, you know, with their current standing or something in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big thing, you know, like horseshoe theory, and like in terms of product placement as well, there's like a theory, if you're like all in the middle, it all ends up getting bundled up. No one gets enough attention. But if you're on extremes, like, you know, the entire left side goes to you, the entire right side goes to you. More views, more attention, everything. And that's the sad reality of content, of life, of politics. That's one of the issues I have as well with the Manosphere, sort of, that they're going after these very like young and impressionable men who are like in bad times in their life or something, and just trying to feed them their own views and not really like, you know, giving them enough space sometimes to develop their own views and critically think about what works, what doesn't work, and is this really something I should be thinking or not.
And I think what I would say about Hamza, I think I was kind of dissing all these influencers right now, but what I do like about him is that I think he's still a good leader for young men, to like someone to look up to, because you look at his life, you know, he came from absolute poverty, right? He was on the edge of like, I think, needing government, I forget, healthcare, welfare,
government assistance.
I think it was welfare is what he said. I think it works a little differently in British government. And he went from that, you know, working like a couple of jobs and like completely hating his life. You know, he was in bad terms with his family, and he went from that to now having a 6 or 7 figure YouTube business and having his own course. You know, building an aesthetic physique, and you know, and having a good mental health, which is probably the most important thing that led to all those other things. And so I think he is a leader for young men, and maybe some of the things he says, you know, like when he talks about SMB and all these things about women and derogatory terms, they can be a little bit, you know, a little bit rough. And what I would say, my point is that I don't necessarily 100% agree with him, but I do think that he is someone to look up to and a good leader. I don't know.
I would attest. I do still think like some of these influencers, I would still say are like a net positive for their audience, and I guess for like their close circle and their family, because they are At least if you watch Hamza's story, like he's definitely becoming a lot better person over the journey that he's documented for YouTube. And although, like, we were just talking about a video beforehand about, like, this video that he just came out about critiquing Western women, and you're like, whoa, that one's kind of, like, in left field there, sort of thing, and would definitely disagree with some of the points he brings up in that. I still think he's impacted, like, a lot of young men, including us, for the better, in terms of kind of, like, cleaning up our life a little bit, being more others focused.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree that like he does bring a lot of positives to the table for young men because, you know, it's motivational content. It gets them to like do something about the situation they're in. If they're like in a bad situation, you gotta maintain the mic distance here.
Yeah.
I just think, you know, people need to find their jumping off point as well and sort of start thinking for themselves.
Oh, for a fact. I definitely get that. A lot of people, they find, like, you know, he calls himself a cult leader.
A lot of people just join the cult.
Join the cult and then, like, adopt his exact personality. But, like, even if you make a channel that's exactly the same, no one wants that. And no one wants you to act like him in real life either. Like, be your own person. And, like, that's something I value in my friends and myself is, like, being my own, like, being a critical thinker, like you said. That's why, like, I think you should also aspire to have a diverse group of friends, but that's a whole different topic. Actually, we talked about friendship last podcast. You should go and watch that if you haven't already.
Yeah.
It's good plugging time for that. But what I totally forgot what I was going to say yet again. I did want to start talking about one of the more controversial things that he talks about, which is probably SMV, right? I do think there's definitely it's very toxic in nature, I guess, if you'd say, like, oh, just ranking a person on their attractiveness. But I'd say the positive of it is it gives a way for young men to, like, look at themselves, and if they're unhappy with their life, it's like, oh, you can do these certain things to improve yourself. Now, where I think it gets a little bit toxic is, like, when he talks about women saying, like, oh, like, their only, you know, trait is, like, how attractive they are, and that's, like, all genetics. You know, that's kind of toxic to just say, oh, women are just, you know, it's based on how attractive they are, that's it. But I will say that, like, at least for me, it's like, oh, I want to work on these certain things because I feel like that would make me a more attractive and overall wholesome person in general. You guys agree?
I'll say something about SMB, which means sexual market value.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if we
should
clarify
explain
that.
it probably. Yeah. You want to explain it?
I will, yeah, that's what I was going to do. So sexual market value, it's derived from a concept called hypergamy, which hypergamy is like an evolutionary phenomenon that describes how men and women interact via, like, their sexual nature, so to speak. So the idea is that you say you have women on one side and men on the other, and that women will only look or entertain men who are of equal status, wealth, attractiveness, intelligence, and above. And that men only look at women who are equal or below them in terms of wealth, status, attractiveness, intelligence, physical fitness, that sort of thing. So where it gets a little controversial is that a lot of the people in the manosphere or in the self-improvement want, and why it specifically speaks to young men, is it talks about, like, through, you know, making money, through building a sick body, through becoming more charismatic and personable, that you have a lot more leeway to, like, rise the ranks on the man's side, and that makes a lot more, like, women available, I guess, to you as, like, sexual or romantic partners. And a lot of where, like, the problems come in, where a lot of, like, derogatory language is said towards women, is that they're a lot of times treated as though that they were, like, women have very little room to move on their side, whether it's like you just kind of been dealt a hand in terms of, like, your genetics of how you look, and yeah, pretty much all boils down to, like, appearance and body shape and body type, and that's kind of where you fall, and, like, nothing else has any value, and you have no chance to really, like, move up and down. You just kind of have to, again, either find someone who's, like, equal or above status.
Yeah, so I definitely agree to some extent that there are different factors that go into how attractive you are to other people, but I think, again, a more holistic view is sort of required. Like, it's not just status, how attractive you are, how rich you are. There's a lot of things that go into that, like how secure you are in yourself, your attachment style, your culture,
the like where you, well, I guess also like how you are emotionally.
Emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence.
And maturity.
Maturity. Your personality, all of that is a big deal as well. And I think like the whole SMV, a lot of influencers just like communicate it as, oh, you know, if you have 6-pack abs, 6-figure salary, and 6 feet or taller, you know, you're gonna get all the women. When in reality, it doesn't quite add up. And I see a lot of influencers talking about like the 20-80 thing, where like 80% of women
are interested in 20% of guys.
And 20% of men. And that's based on a study that interviewed a whopping 27 women, by the way. Wow. So there's not much evidence for that. OkCupid did its own study with obviously more than just 27 women. And they found that actually men care a lot more about attractiveness than women do. Women were very harsh judging men on their appearance, but then they also swiped right on a lot more men who were like, who they graded low in appearance. So it's a very like controversial topic, and a lot of people are trying to use like flawed logic to defend this idea that like, oh yeah, you know, you don't have to be a good person or know who you are. You just have to be like rich and successful and like have muscles.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've even like personally maybe like succumbed to that thinking for a period of time where like, man, if you can just like, you know, get rich or like make some sort of money and get in good shape and stuff, that all of a sudden you'll have all this attention and the women are going to flock to you. And realizing that like, bro, like you got to be a good person. And there's a lot more things.
I think there's some parts that are, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I think there's some parts to it that are realistic though. Like,
I think disclaimer, yes, if you get attractive and rich, you will get a lot of women. Do you want to date the women that you're getting just because you're very rich and have a lot of money and they'll date you regardless of like having a shitty personality is the question?
No. What I was going to say is, I guess when you become kind of location independent because you're rich, I think this is something that Mangazzi talks about a lot, is because he has the ability to travel around and like meet like higher quality women like where he goes, you know, because a lot of men couldn't actually travel out there and spend the money to go to those places in Dubai where he hangs out. Like that ability has put him in the place to actually be able to interact with those women, which I think you would have to build yourself up in order to do that. Now, I don't know how high quality those women are in general in terms of their personality and whatever, but I'm just assuming that like having higher level of status and money would allow you to not have to worry about those certain things and give you more time to, I guess, soul search in a sense, you know, in a way to put it.
Definitely. Status and money is never like hurt in any endeavor.
Also with status, you see it all the time, because like even if it's like Pete Davidson is an example. This man is ugly as hell, but his status, I think he's ugly as hell.
I think he's ugly as hell.
But you know, he's like,
I'll vouch for Pete, bro.
But look at this man go. I mean, you got Kim Kardashian and Ariana Grande, you know. I think he's a symbol of that because of, well, I mean, it might not just have to do with his status, but like you'd see it, right?
I don't think he has that much status in comparison to the women he's dating.
Yeah. Okay, maybe this was a bad example. Okay, maybe this personality. I think it was probably his personality then, but that was a bad example.
No, I think that was a good example of how like I guess his like personality or his vibe is so redeeming that these. Like, I read it like in an article I read about it. Like these A-listers are like just kind of finding him from SNL.
Because he's so like confident and so magnetic. But of course, the dude like has to be confident and magnetic for a living. Like it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
No, my point was actually about like status. And I was saying like, oh, if you're someone famous, that gives you a level of like attraction, I think. Because like people want to hang out with you because, oh, you're like, you know, whatever, even if it's like TikTok famous or whatever the hell, you know. I think that the level of mystery and I don't even know, like the clout that you have, you know, it attracts people towards you, whether we like it or not. I think that's just a hard fact.
Because I think that points to the fact that like ultimately like we all want people's attention. So if you, when it comes to like celebrities who have big audiences, I guess we perceive their attention as more valuable because they have more things pulling at it. Mm-hmm. So when they give it to you, it is like, I guess
you feel more special.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, we all crave validation in some way or another.
Yeah. Absolutely. In the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, like the first chapter talks about how the number one desire is the desire to feel important.
Exactly.
And that if you fulfill that, like everybody will love you.
No, I think that's definitely true. And to your point, I actually agree with that. I think being famous, having a lot of money, helps you have like the surface level attraction.
Yeah.
Having clout, whatever, gives
Yeah.
you like surface level attraction. But then if you actually want that to go further and be a meaningful relationship, you have to like
personality, yeah.
have a personality, be compatible with like the person you're trying to date as well.
Oh,
Because you
yeah.
might both like be very successful, great personalities, whatever. But like if your attachment styles are like complete opposite, or if like
Your values are very
you're a
different.
very like
yeah,
funny person and they're like, you know, they've never listened to a joke in their life. They're sort of like the stereotype people have about Germans. It's like, we do not have a sense of comedy. I'm half German, I have a German passport, I'm allowed to say this. Then, you know, you might not make the best couple.
Yeah, no, I get that. So I guess
My question to you, Duncan, is do you have a problem with people using terms like high value man or high value woman?
I'd say I do, because it sort of oversimplifies things. And I think that ties into sort of what you were saying about how, you know, Manosphere is sort of a derogatory term, because it combines all these people who are doing different things into the same umbrella. Like, I think definitely some people who are like, oh, you're in the Manosphere, are just self-improvement YouTubers who want people to, like, you know, become better versions of themselves. And at the same time, I think saying like, oh, you're a high value man, you're a high value woman, in the first place, like, oftentimes boils it down to like attractiveness, wealth, success, all of that, when there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And especially because this is being used like towards younger men who are like more impressionable and who maybe are in, well, normally are like in a bad period of their lives, because that's why they're seeking out this content. Like it can give them very false impressions that won't lead them to any like permanent happiness.
But that's you bring up a good point. You're in saying that everyone has subjective ideas of what is high value and what is low value. But I think that is a good term, because I think we all in our like hearts like know what, we have this idea of what high value is, and that's what we should strive for.
Well, that's
if it's healthy. I guess if you're like
yeah.
being a little bit shallow about it, then maybe not. But I generally think that like in the self-improvement realm, maybe not the whole red pill realm.
Yeah.
The idea of being a high value man yourself is a healthy idea, because it also includes your personality. I don't want us to forget that like even SMV includes your personality. I mean, obviously it focuses a lot about making yourself rich and working on your body, but it also personality is part of it. I think that, like I said before, the toxic part of it is how it describes women, and it kind of just puts them in a category of just being based on looks. It's very shallow in that sense.
Yeah.
And that's where I probably disagree with it a lot more.
That's fair. I'd say, what is it? The problem I have isn't with most people who have an idea of that in their mind. The problem is that a lot of people are starting to go towards like the red pill or black pill region, and they're getting those very like one-dimensional like ideas of what like makes you a valuable person to be around or to be in a relationship with, and like just like radicalizing like people who are having a rough time in their lives like isn't the best thing.
No, that's true for sure.
And I definitely agree, like in a lot of, well, it's literally called the Manosphere, like all of these concepts that apply exactly the same way to women, or maybe not exactly but very similarly to women, right? They're just never applied to them. It's like, oh yeah, a woman has to be attractive, that's it, but a man has to do this and that and that. And it's like, you know, if a woman like went out there and like she worked on herself, she has a good personality and stuff like that, obviously that makes her more attractive too. And people are sort of oversimplifying that a lot as well.
Well, it brings up a good point, and I guess the only similarity I can see in the whole Manosphere, like all these different groups, I think they're trying to empower men, and I think there's innate good in that alone ideology, but like how they do it is how they go about it, right? Are they putting down women by trying to elevate men, like, oh, women ain't shit, like, you go king, you know, that kind of shit.
That is a good point, because
Yeah.
ultimately, like, when you shouldn't be building yourself up by tearing other people down. Like, you shouldn't be pushing someone lower to really elevate yourself. It's elevating yourself. And I feel like one of the big aspects of, like, you know, becoming a better person is the ability to empower and inspire others. So of course, as you in this, I guess apply to
That's
any
a really good point.
business friend group and stuff. Like, the only way that you should really strive to like elevate yourself is while doing the same thing to everybody, or is like bringing as many people up with you at the same time.
Yes, absolutely.
This
That's
is the
a very
most-
based view.
Wait, what does based view mean?
You don't know what based means?
No, you said that
Bro,
earlier. I
that's
honestly,
cringe.
I didn't understand what that
Based
meant.
means is basically like, I'd say unorthodox or like against mainstream.
How do you
Well,
spell that?
I always think of it more in the meme sense, where like base means like, oh, that's very like epic.
Oh, I mean that's true.
Wait,
too,
how do you
but, like,
spell it though? What?
BASED. So like a common meme people will make is you'll be like, yo, that's base, and they'll be like, based on what?
Yeah, for
But,
a while
like-
I didn't remember. For a while I didn't know what it meant, and I just like had to go off context clues. I had to look it up eventually. It's like, what does this mean? Because
No
usually all my friend groups would use it, and I was like, oh my god, what does this mean? I'm always like the last person to know what all these terms mean in general.
Yeah, I need to reconnect
I feel like
to
a-
meme culture. Maybe you can help me with that.
You know, hit me up sometime.
Yeah, I got
I'm
you.
somewhat of an
Yeah.
expert myself.
Pumpkin lives in the memes, bro.
But no, I definitely agree. Like that is the ultimate goal of like self-improvement, right? To be able to not only help yourself go higher, but also others. It's sort of like in Buddhism. You're not just trying to enlighten yourself, you're also trying to like help others.
You're not
reach
Buddhist, right?
enlightenment. I'm not Buddhist. But I guess I'm allowed to speak on that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting concept, and I think there's a lot to learn from like Buddhism as a whole.
Interesting.
I think, yeah,
I
right
hope
now.
all religions are like that in some sense, right?
I think, yeah, right now I'm actually reading through the Bible.
Of course.
I'm not very religious, but like I'm going through it to sort of learn what lessons there are there. And after that, I want to go through some scriptures from other major religions as well.
Do Hinduism.
I do want to.
All the Balinese would be proud of you. Yeah, but I wanted to shift gears now and move away a little bit from women, and maybe talk about like other instant gratification things that Jeffrey might do, like video games. We talked about that. I know you're kind of a proponent of video games in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
Or you don't like the heat that it's getting.
yeah, I don't like the heat that it's getting, but like I also play like, I don't know, 2-3 hours a week. When I'm like in a work meeting, I'm like, oh, I don't care about this.
Oh my god.
I actually feel bad because I've been neglecting my gaming. Like I want to finish Elden Ring, but like I keep like doing other stuff instead. I'm like, damn it.
So you'd say you don't have an addictive personality at all.
Well, you see, I used to, and sometimes I still do this, where I'm like very addicted to books. Like I'll read a book,
That
not
is
a
so
bad-
fascinating.
It's not a bad thing, honestly.
and I'll like,
No, yeah, can you talk about that? Because
Yeah,
we were talking
so-
about it earlier.
right. I guess it might have sprung from an interesting place as well. As a kid, like I moved to an English-speaking country, could not speak English. But my first introduction to the English language was reading. And so I read a lot, and I sometimes did that, pursued that above like social interaction with others.
Wow.
So like there is this, you won't get this experience unless you're like in the Middle East. We had this class called non-Islamic class, where all the Muslim kids go like pray and learn about Islam, and you just go read a random book because they don't care like about what you're doing. So in one of those sessions, I ended up like, you know what? This semester, I'm going to read the English dictionary. And so I did.
Wow.
And then after that, I could, speak English a whole lot better. So,
But
it was
that doesn't
good
teach
shit.
you how to put words together. That just teach you. Oh, actually, I guess it does, because
There's
sentences.
example
There's
sentences and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
In fact, I read through it twice. Once for like reading everything completion's sake, and twice when I was like 10 or 11, disclaimer, or 9, something like that. I read through it once, looking at all the words that had like haha funny sex in it.
As any kid would.
Yeah,
of
as any
course.
kid would. But I'd sometimes like stay up very late, where it would be detrimental to like my health or my performance in school, like reading a book. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be fiction. Like I fucking nerd. I did it with an
I
encyclopedia
don't know. I'd say
once.
that's much
You're
more.
the first person I've ever met that has
I know,
read a
right.
dictionary or encyclopedia.
You're the first person I've met that's like not addicted to video games, but has been, before at least, addicted to reading, which I think is still a healthy habit.
Yeah.
I'd say, because being a well-read person is just such a valuable skill. And you can even monetize that, to be honest. I mean, a lot of these self-improvement YouTubers, they monetize their ability to read. Like Hamza, he literally just reads books and then spews the information he's read. Not even like information he's gotten himself, but just information that someone else like got from whatever they did. And he just takes that information and spews it online because people don't have the time or the attention span or whatever it is to read books, or they want to give the time,
Yeah.
Obviously, attention span, like we mentioned before, it's much more complex than I think Hamza makes it out to be. We can talk about that even.
Yeah,
It's,
sure. I'll speak about that a bit as well after.
Yeah. What are your like main problems, at least in this stance, with Hamza's view on video games? And
I think he sort of makes out to be a very extreme, like, oh, if you play video games, you're wasting your time, you're going to get addicted. When, well, I hate to say this, but I think it really reflects on the personal issues he was having, and he's sort of projecting it onto his entire audience, where it's like, you can have a healthy relationship with video games. You can actually monetize your knowledge of video games, like Let's Play, streamers, that's a huge industry.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a lot to be gained from them. Some of my favorite narratives, like even though I enjoy books that much, have been from like video games, because something you can do in that medium, I guess, is have the gameplay also tell a part of the story or the message. So I guess personal story here, back when I was in like late middle school, early high school, I was going through a rough patch in my life, and I started playing like Dark Souls. And sort of the very, very classic based gamer moment. But sort of the themes of like life, death, how much all of those matter, and like getting back up again, and like, you know, using your own skills to overcome obstacles that like maybe a day ago or like a month ago or something would have seemed like unsurmountable to you, really resonated with me and helped me like keep going with the obstacles in my life. So I think there's a lot to be gained from that. Like, in some situations, even more than there is to be gained from like a certain piece of literature, because there's an interactive component to it.
Wow.
what's the rebuttal, Adonis? No, one thing I wanted to say, if you want to think about what you were going to say, is I think you mentioned that it comes down to the person more often than it does, like, it's just video games being the evil of it. I think one important message that Hamza says is that it all depends on your mental health. I think if you're in a better mental space, you won't have this addictive personality to video games or whatever other negative habits you have. I think if you actually take the time to figure out what your issues are, like maybe you spend 10 minutes a day meditating like he claims, and do some gratitude journaling or regular journaling and whatnot, those things can help you solve your addictive personality. Because I think a lot of the time addictions to like negative instant gratifications kind of spew from a level of bad mental health and even procrastination for other things, or you're just coping by doing
Very much a coping mechanism.
Coping mechanism,
Copium.
right? Copium, yeah. So once you solve that or figure out the reason why you are procrastinating, it's much easier to solve your addiction, I think. Which is, I guess it's like coming back to my point is video games aren't the bad guy. They're just the symptom.
They aren't the problem.
They're the symptom.
Yeah,
not
they're the
root
symptom,
cause.
not the
Yeah.
which is what we should be doing, is looking at the root cause and not the symptom. The root cause is you have shit mental health. So figure that out, you know.
That's a good point.
Absolutely. And I think like some of the stuff you were talking about, like journaling and like gratitude meditation, like I do some of that, and I find it great that Hamza like advocates for that, because that really can have such a positive effect on your mental health.
So back, I guess, to like, I don't want to call it necessarily a rebuttal, but just a question really, or I'll make a point first and then ask the question. Is that the point that a lot of these people in the self-improvement world, they make about video games, and I don't know if you specified for the podcast, but we talked about earlier how you're more of like a single player type gamer, and I guess the big problem with those is like being sucked into them and like wasting a lot of time getting addicted to them. But a lot of critiques that people in this internet space make about multiplayer games, especially like for guys, and when it comes to like first person shooter games or any multiplayer game, is that it gives you a false sense of accomplishment. And that was like an interesting point that I'm still kind of holding on to, is that you go on these like adventures or challenges with your friends and stuff, and you win the match, you get to the next level and stuff, and ultimately like you have this rush of like victory, and you won, you're like camaraderie with your friends, but ultimately you've done nothing. That you haven't like improved, I guess, like your community or your friend group hasn't like grown in any sort of way. And that's kind of like, it's touching back to like, all of this is just like trying to see if we can like touch back or connect with like the ancestral way of like how humans grew up in a tribal setting and stuff, and how like ultimately men specifically have become so much weaker and like contribute so much less to like their community and their family because they are just bombarded with video games, social media, porn, those types of things that disconnects them with other people. And so after that spiel, my point, I guess the question I wanted to ask is, what is your opinion really on that? Like, do you think this whole idea that like within the multiplayer space that it does give you a false sense of accomplishment, and that I guess it does have negative effects on how you spend your time?
Yeah, definitely. I guess I have two things to talk about there. Sort of the sense that like, oh, men are getting weaker and contributing less, which I'll talk about second, and then the whole multiplayer games thing. I don't have that much experience with multiplayer games. I used to play League of Legends for a while, but I only play like with my one friend who got me into it originally, I guess, because I really didn't think there was a point in playing it without like having a friend there, because it's just everyone in that game is so toxic, like it's well known. But I think it can give you a sense of false accomplishment, but again, I think it depends like how likely you are to like get that false sense of accomplishment from things in the first place. Like you get a ranking, right? Like you'll be like bronze 1, that puts you like in, I don't know, the top 80% of players, which is like you're bad, you're not like good at this yet. But at the same time, like you get an SAT score, and then that gives you like a false sense of accomplishment. You're like, oh, I'm so smart. It depends on how you personally like latch onto things like these and how like confirmed you are. Like for example, if you make it into the top 1% of players in a game, like you can easily monetize that, your like reaction time, your like strategic thinking in terms of the game and stuff like that. Your accomplishment is real. Like people have to train a lot for that, right? But if you're like, I know, like, oh, top 70% or something, and you're like, I'm such a god, like, oh my god, I've achieved so much, obviously that's like blown out of proportion.
I think the bigger point that you were actually about to get into is the point I was trying to make, was commenting on that whole idea that men are getting weaker and stuff, and therefore society is getting weaker and corrupt and that sort of thing, getting as like quote unquote like the male population is disconnecting from like the more tribal ways that we spent most of our time evolving and developing in.
Sure. So let me talk about that a little bit. I think it's a common like misconception that people think, oh, back then things were so much better. Like back then all humans were like malnourished, our brain structures weren't as evolved as they were now, and the average height of men has continued to increase over history. It's like had a slight decline recently, but mainly because that's not as necessary anymore, and we're developing more and more like brain infrastructure and things like that to compensate. But like if you put the average height man from like the 2000s, 1990s, anywhere in the last 200 years up against like a caveman, like caveman's gonna be like a tiny like malnourished bitch in comparison. Like, wait, can I swear? Are we getting
yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay.
No, YouTube actually allows you to even say, you know, I don't want to say certain things.
Okay, let's
but like they allow you to do a lot more now.
All right, well we'll save it for the
parents
ASMR
watch this.
stream.
So yeah.
But apart from that, the whole notion that we're contributing less value, it all depends on how you categorize and how you view value. Back then, were we really doing that much activities of value? Like, sure, there are some people who are like, there's like a few people that probably invented the wheel around the same time in different places around the world, right? And fire and shit like that. But then I'm sure there's a good amount of people who just went out, like, ate a rabbit, went back in their cave, had sex, ate a rabbit, and did that for their entire life. Like, they'd just be addicted to something else, or like they wouldn't be achieving something, or they wouldn't want to even achieve like greatness. Although I suppose the concept of greatness may be a bit much for a caveman's brain to handle.
Yeah.
But, you know, we have such a big population now as well that in absolute terms, yes, absolutely, like the amount of men who aren't maybe doing anything productive has risen. But how is that in percentage terms, right? Like, we don't know that, and there's so many different avenues that people can take towards doing great things, whether that's towards society or just within yourself or within your friend group or something like that, that it's really hard to categorize what being a productive member of society looks like. Like, obviously, the dude who, I don't know, lives in the corner of a street and shoots up heroin every day, and that's like his only activity,
Sad.
won't be
Yeah.
productive. But again, like there are different systems that drive people towards that, and that's also something that I think is very contributive in sort of the opinions people have about men nowadays. Like, we're getting weaker.
Yeah, I have multiple comments about this whole conversation. I'm trying to remember all of them. Simultaneously, the first one that came into my head was when you were talking about how video games simulate what you actually might want in your life, or maybe it's just something that you think is really cool, or you aspire to be. This like idea of like in Dark Souls or Elden Ring, you're this like warrior, then you wear all this fancy armor and you're going and slaying the beast. And I think, part of us is like, oh, that is so cool. Like, I want to be this person. At least subconsciously in your head, you're thinking that. Obviously, it's not realistic. It's all these fake creatures and gigantic, ginormous looking, ugly things that you fight in dark. Oh, God, I'll give you nightmares, bro. This Dark Souls, some of those creatures. But I think subconsciously, like Hamza said, a part of you wants to level up your character and become like this great warrior. And maybe that's not like, obviously there's no need for that in today's society. Some people would argue otherwise. Mm-hmm. I think that's up to each person to decide. But I think it's very interesting. It's a very fascinating just side point that I think that in a lot of video games, we actually model like a traditional character that you're trying to become, right? Even though society isn't, we're moving away from what that character is. And then my second point is, while, a popular belief in like the self-improvement, like very traditional self-improvement YouTubers is that like, oh, like the old times are better. Like you said, it's like a fallacy, right?
Yeah.
They think like, oh, things were much better when, we didn't have all this, like all these modern world problems, but like people were living less, average height was lower. I don't know why you mentioned that in specific, but
I mean, that's something people mention a lot when they're like, men are getting physically weaker as well.
Yeah.
I know Hamza mentioned that in one of his videos.
Oh yeah, you talk about testosterone too.
Well, I
like
think
the
yeah.
average testosterone has gone down radically.
Well, to my understanding of that point was that they're more so talking about human societies, men and women in pre-agricultural civilizations, back when it was mainly hunter-gatherer and tribal settings. And at least from what I've heard, like what the stuff I've heard is like very much, I guess, different than what you heard. I've heard like on different podcasts that I guess like humans used to be on average like above 6 foot, and were I guess like a lot more nourished physically and cognitively capable, and that our species as a whole has like declined since agriculture became a thing.
I mean, first of all, I'm fairly certain that's not true. Second of all, like, damn, should we uninvent corn?
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, though.
Okay,
like,
I found some evidence on this. According to a new study from Imperial College in London, the average human is getting shorter. The report, looking at 1,400 studies from more than 200 countries, included measured heights of 18.6 million people from 1896 to 1996. Overall, average human height seems to have peaked about 30 to 40 years ago.
yeah,
Interesting.
what I was mentioning earlier, like, it has gone down a bit recently. But
So
height
recently
is,
you meant like 40 years ago.
yeah, I don't mean like recently, like
Not
development
like-
of agriculture.
Yeah.
Like,
I
I
guess-
kept going up because the thing about agriculture and cooked food actually is that like it's a way more efficient way to get your nutrition.
Cooking meat is
Yeah.
good.
Cooking meat gives you a lot more like value for like every pound of meat than just eating it raw, which is like why we are a lot better nourished and why we kept growing taller and taller ever since back then. But even if we were taller back then, like, I don't know if there's much point in comparing us to back then. We're a vastly different species, thanks to all the tools and systems we've like developed.
The point I wanted to make was, for me at least, I think, the future can be a really good thing. And I think technology is supposed to help us, get over these even barbaric natures of our human nature, right? You look at the old times, like people were just killing themselves because of a lack of information, lack of knowledge, a lot of things they couldn't explain with all these diseases going around and the weather and whatnot. And I think that's why technology is good. And obviously there's, the radical side of it, with video games, even in the metaverse and all this stuff that could potentially lead to us just getting physically weaker and mentally weaker and whatnot. But I think, at least in my idea, the best way of looking at it is, we can use this technology for good, and there is like a good way to balance this traditional values with the modern technology and modern ideas.
And I think that, like, really the manosphere, and well, I don't want to say the manosphere, the self-improvement realm is really a reaction to all the, I guess, negative side effects of
the
technology, like specifically our phones, the internet, etc. That, because it talks about a lot how, this comes in with like the dopamine detox, how we are just like bombarded by advertisements, social media. We have all these restaurants and all this food that's like engineered to get the craziest reactions from our taste buds. And so like the point he was making is that, or the point that people in the self-improvement realm make, is that all the like concepts that are taught and preached in the self-improvement space would not really be that necessary in like a pre-modern environment, because people were not, on the regular being spammed with stuff on their phone and not being not have to worry about overeating and stuff, and having like a big one is pornography too, not having to deal with that.
Oh, you mentioned eating too. I think it's the sad reality, at least in America, is like, you realize how like unhealthy a lot of food is, because of like, for a lot of companies, it's a lot cheaper to use more processed ingredients, like high fructose corn syrup, the bane of my existence. and people drink Coke like it's water. It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, so like I've heard a lot of like people tell me stories of like, like I was fat when I was living in America, and then I went to Europe for like 3 weeks or like a month or so, and I lost so many pounds. And obviously they're probably traveling around and whatnot, but like, you don't just lose that amount of weight just traveling around. It's your diet that actually affects it. And I think the sad reality of the modern world, especially in the West, is, especially in America, is that a lot of the food is just unhealthy, especially if you're not knowledgeable about what you're consuming, which is just a slight little side point that I wanted to make.
Hard agree though. There's so much unhealthy food out there nowadays, and the sad reality is the unhealthiest food is the easiest to get. So if you're poor, not only are you going to be poor, you're only going to have access to, like, for example, non-nutritious foods.
Fast food,
and it's just a horrible cycle. And I do really think that's one of the like big challenges of the modern world, like figuring out food in general, food distribution and like what type of foods in fact we should even like allow to be produced. Maybe there's a limit of like how much high fructose corn syrup there can be in this like single fry or burger or something.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things I'm passionate about, because of like the health problems that I've dealt with in the past few years, is changing the story and like policies about food in America. Because for people who don't know this, like the same American brands like McDonald's, you go buy a bag of Doritos or Coke, the ingredients of those same products are different in Europe and other parts of the world, because those countries do not allow certain chemicals and whatever to be included in those things, which is why you hear stories of people going to different countries and suddenly like, their health problems, whatever, little aches and pains they deal with go away. They lose weight because our systems in America are just clogged by all the junk that's allowed into our food.
Absolutely. And I think also I'll get back to the point you were making about like different challenges now with technology and stuff. We sort of went to the food topic, but I like it.
That's all part of it, I think.
It really is.
The problems of modern day, we're tackling them one by one. So
the entire world. But I think that goes a lot into as well the economic systems that were chosen. America is like very, very free market. Like the invisible hand will fix everything, whereas Europe like definitely has a lot more regulation. Very visible hands, I should say. And I think even there needs to be a balance, right? You don't want the state controlling everything, like social credit score going down by 50 right now. You don't want like a China type of situation, but at the same time, you don't want corporations and the market to have so much control that they can actively like decrease the life expectancy and the life quality, more importantly almost, of your citizens by like such a drastic amount. Like a society like that obviously isn't functioning efficiently. But going back to your point about like how we face all these new and difficult challenges nowadays, I think that is just like a part of life though, you know, when things change, new problems come with it. And even when things change for the better, you're going to have more and more complex problems as well to deal with, right? Now with technology as well, it's funny. This is like maybe not the best example, but it's one that I can definitively remember. I think bone structures and like the pinkies of humans are evolving, so we can like not evolving, but like changing, so that we can carry our bones more efficiently.
Oh, really?
You know how we have like
Are you serious?
this?
Wow.
Oh my god!
Apparently
I'm
there's,
not
like,
letting
a-
my child have a phone.
It's not like a bad thing either. It's just like
No,
we
that's
are
a whole- that's a whole
consistently
side
changing
topic.
to adapt to like the different new challenges that we're facing.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
always going to be difficult. Back then, you know, the challenge may have been more die, live,
Finding-
you know,
Find something to shoot.
find something to eat, or you will die. Nowadays, it's like you will die a slow death if you don't figure out who you are, what you want to be, what you want to do.
You just gave me chills when you said that. Dang.
Well, 2 points I want to make. First, I want to validate that by saying, yeah, I think that's kind of by nature and genetics. That's how humans and almost every creature is like we adapt to the environment that we are in. And then the second point I wanted to say, going back to the first point, let me finish that. So I want to say, yeah, I think it's a little bit ridiculous when you see a lot of these guys saying, "Oh, traditionalism. We need to
We need to start
stick with
shitting in our
roots."
food again.
Not quite that, but like I guess this idea of
mean-
like maintaining there's good values in the traditionalism, but like obviously it gets a little bit radical, and I think that's just a little bit ridiculous because I think there's good aspects to embrace what you have right now, because it's not going to help you to like train like a warrior in modern society, because we don't have to deal with that. We have to deal with getting a job and making enough money.
Yeah. We've moved up the hierarchy of needs somewhat.
Yeah, right. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, we're higher on the list of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then my second point is to validate the other side of it. And I will say that at least there is a need for there's a reason that all these self-improvement YouTubers are getting so much attention. And I think it's because all these young men are finding themselves lacking a purpose, lacking happiness and whatnot. And maybe that is because, obviously it's because of technology providing this platform for YouTubers to go on there. But also maybe it's because people, I don't know the statistics, but maybe some of these people are generally less happy. And maybe they were, even if times were worse and people were dying faster and all this stuff, maybe their life had more meaning back then, at least for them. What do you guys think about that?
I think
It's hard to have an actual answer on this. We don't know.
but it's a very cool discussion.
I'll say from personal experience, because I definitely think like Duncan and I, like you and our temperament and personality is very different. And so I don't want to like put words in your mouth, but you seem like, at least based on how I understand you so far, you seem like much more like, I guess, content with like a modern lifestyle, where like for me, I've very much like found value in the self-improvement world of kind of just like removing, I guess, a lot of instant gratification or just like, time fillers pretty much. And at least in my feeding myself a story that I'm like working towards a higher purpose and doing more things that are like physically and cognitively engaging. So I think with the point I'm making, it connects to your point that like some people are different. It boils down to like a case on case basis. Like some people, it'll resonate, like these concepts in the self-improvement world, dare I even say the manosphere, will just like resonate with some people more than others. Like personally, like one thing I know it's egregious to say this, but like agree with Andrew Tate on is that like I've always, since like I was a kid, always like wished I could fight or knew how to fight. And I remember as a kid like looking at myself in the mirror and like like telling to myself what kind of bitch are you? Like who are you?
No, I get that.
Swearing
Like,
definitely.
It's also like what are you gonna do if someone tries to attack you and you can't defend yourself? Like, are you really gonna, like, especially if you have someone to protect, like a girlfriend or a wife, children, like you're really gonna be defenseless there?
Totally.
Even
Especially
with modern systems like police and everything, it's just like
I felt this a lot when I was in a relationship, and you can comment on this too. Like when you're by yourself as just a single dude, like you can pretty much just like, just stay in your own lane, keep walking, avoid any conflict. But when you have a girlfriend, wife, kids and stuff, then there's like people that you have to protect. And I remember when I was in a relationship, that idea would wear on me so much. We'd be like, we'd either be out clubbing or maybe just we're in a downtown area or just out and about. And I'm like, just like constantly worrying about like safety. And just in those moments would like just feel so inadequate and weak and ill prepared for any like compromising situations that could occur.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take. I guess two-pronged response to that again. I think there is a lot of value in traditional stuff like that. I think definitely strengthening your body will make your mind feel better as well. I absolutely agree with that. And like, I think instant gratification, like you need to put a limit on it. As with everything in life, like you need balance. That's my personal philosophy. Like I don't keep social media on my phone. I reinstall Instagram every 2 months to go through all the messages I've gotten.
I do the
and
same
respond
thing.
to the memes.
I do the same thing.
But I've never had a TikTok. I don't have Facebook. I even don't have LinkedIn on my phone.
Really, LinkedIn?
Yeah, because you just end up wasting time. If you're actually applying to jobs, you're doing it on your like laptop, not your phone.
That's fair.
But on the fighting term of things, I guess I have a different perspective on that. I've sort of, my dad is still very involved in martial arts. He does Adonis, which is like a Filipino martial art. He was world champion back in 2000.
How do you spell that?
Oh shoot! Yeah,
Arnis.
You think we could find your dad?
Arnis. Yes, that's how you spell.
Let's see. Yeah.
Oh, it's with sticks?
It's with
Oh,
sticks and
I've seen
other
videos of
weapons.
that before.
Yeah.
I've seen videos of that.
And so I grew up like with a lot of, well, not a lot maybe, but a good amount of like background in martial arts just
So you've done
naturally.
some training.
Yeah, and well, when I moved to Dubai and I couldn't speak any English, I got into a fight about every week.
Oh my god!
I was
Like physical
constantly
fights?
in detention.
Was that people bullying you or just misunderstanding you?
So the first time like it ever happened, and I think it sets a good backdrop for things. I couldn't speak English that well, and like there are these people making fun of me for having smaller eyes because I'm like half Asian.
Yeah.
I tried to tell a
That's
teacher
so
about
racist.
it because I was like, that is racist. Yeah, but they're kids, like
Yeah.
Well,
don't validate it.
I'm not validating it, but at the same time, they probably don't know better. It might be their parents' fault.
that
at
is a sad reality.
I was like, we were like 6 or something. I tried telling the teacher, and they like wouldn't listen. So I was like, okay. So I beat them.
Wow.
And so that just escalated into like more and more of my problems getting solved through fighting instead of like verbal confrontations, because that's all I could really rely on back then. Because let's face it, as a person who like had just learned English, moved to a new situation, this is like my first time having a major cultural shift. I got better at it later. I wasn't well equipped to handle that type of stuff without resorting to the good old traditional method of doing things. So I get that, and I guess I can say I'm personally guilty of having used violence a lot to solve personal problems, but I think in a lot of situations there's a lot of better ways to like solve your problems, because the thing is, when you use violence, like there's the odd chance, even if you're fighting like someone who doesn't know anything, they'll hit you in just the right spot. You'll be paralyzed from the spine down, or like, they'll hit you in an organ that you didn't know you had issues with. You'll like pass out or something. A lot of different things can happen, and violence isn't necessarily a good means of solving problems, but I do agree that it does have its place sometimes. Like if someone is trying to fight you.
Absolutely not advocating for violence. It's just the idea is like, there's some quote for some movie or whatever. It's that like, you should not seek out war, but always be ready for it.
Oh yeah. It's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in a war. Yeah. And sorry, what I want to mention about yours is the statement you just made is I completely agree. I think there's a level of like confidence and like adequacy you feel about yourself, knowing that you can defend yourself at any moment, especially your loved ones, especially when you go out anywhere, which comes with that adequacy of like learning a fighting style. A lot of the times, like you mentioned though, like learning a fighting style, like it just isn't realistic for defending yourself when because there's so many variables. When if any altercation actually
or if
happen,
you have a gun, you're just
you
just lose.
That's what I don't want to actually talk about that. But no, yeah, you're right. There's so many variables. You know, they have a gun, they have a knife. Like, what are you gonna do? Yeah. But I think it gives you a level of security and confidence when you're going out, which actually, honestly, like a confident person walking out at night is much less desirable of a target than a person that looks uncomfortable.
That's true. I just look batshit crazy at the people who look like crazy to me when I'm walking around at 3 a.m. and I've never been approached.
Yeah. So I think that level of security, at least for your mental clarity and like being ready for something, that is what like being ready for an altercation. That's what fighting could prepare you for, because at least having that like adrenaline rush of being in a fight with someone in a practice setting even can at least somewhat prepare you for it in real life if that actually happened. It won't solve it, you know, you'll probably break your hand, maybe even worse, you get shot or something. Honestly, you probably should just like, if the guy tries to rob you, give him your money or whatever, or like try to peacefully resolve the situation. But I think it's like coming back to it full circle is just that mental clarity it gives you and the confidence it gives you, knowing that you can defend yourself if needed.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement.
And this is definitely a big tangent that we've taken.
I mean, we've taken a lot of tangents. I think we're having a good time.
Yeah, no, that is the ends mean of this is to have a good time.
Yeah. I think typically, like in the right mindset, learning a martial art or learning self-defense can be really great for you, because it helps you like be confident in yourself and your ability to like, because you still do have like that voice in the back of the head where it's like, oh, must be able to fight off threat, right? That still exists. Whether we like to admit that it's there or not, whether we like to think, oh, I'm too sophisticated for that, it's still there. I think if you're in the right mindset of like gathering knowledge and knowing that you can defend yourself, then it is very healthy, and I recommend like you do learn like a martial art or something. But there's a lot of people that go into it with like, again, a toxic mindset, and they're like, oh, you know, I'm gonna learn how to fight so I can beat people up, or they go to a bar and they're like, I'm going to get into a fight.
I disagree. I feel like if anything, fighting actually makes people less violent, because they understand the severity of it too. And like especially all the fighting people I know, they're very like peaceful people, at least from what I've seen, because they understand, you know, like how serious, you know, they've all injured themselves like doing jiu-jitsu and stuff, so they know how fragile their bodies are, and I think it's just like the confidence and calmness that comes with it. Obviously some people aren't in the right mental space, so they go into it with a bad mindset of like, oh, I'm gonna beat so and so up. But I've never heard of that personally. Like everyone I've met like doing jiu-jitsu, like they're all like in really good mental spaces. And I think the fighting only just helps them to be more prepared and more secure in their own abilities and confidence wherever they go out and whatever they do. So I don't know. You'd probably agree with that too, right?
Well, I haven't had much like personal experience.
Yeah, that's true.
I only know like a handful of people that have participated in martial arts.
I wouldn't say we're like disagreeing either. Like I typically agree with you. It's just like, as with all things, it's like, it's good, but like, you know, you need to think about it and you need to find balance about it. All the people we know that do martial arts are generally in a good mindset about it, because we don't try to.
Oh yeah, you said you tried out jiu-jitsu too with Daniel? Or
I'm planning on doing that more next semester once I have like my half marathon training.
Oh, so done. You've already gone to his gym with him? Okay, cool. That's the same thing we did.
I think we talked about really this. Yeah.
But right now I'm just having to do a lot of running and then work and research and everything. So like I don't really have enough time to dedicate to that, along with like going to the gym as well.
That's fair.
If I only do cardio, like my muscles are gonna like go away.
That's fair. And I think coming back to just a common neutral point, a whole point of this Jeffrey versus Adonis, like I said before, it's like, I think everyone's just trying to find happiness, trying to find love, and the way they go about it, maybe in a more toxic way or maybe in a more healthy way. But I think a more common point that we can all agree is that we all just want to have a good time while we're on this floating rock. And I guess the ways we go about it, we should all just try to help each other, especially if we see one another getting on a more devious path. But also just have a level of understanding that we're all learning. We all are, constantly fluctuating in what we believe, and it really depends on like what you experience and what like who you surround yourself with, I think. And
the final point I'll say to like whatever it is that you think or believe, as as I'm reached adulthood personally and my beliefs systems have like fluctuated all over the place in the last few years. The one thing that I finally came to after finding myself a little too deep in the manosphere and then pulling out a little bit was asking myself, Nathaniel, whatever you think, whatever you believe, like always this one thing that you can like put your beliefs up against as a measuring stick is, are these ideas, these philosophies, are they empowering to people? Are they going to make you a person? Are you going to act in such a way that is like, obviously you want to create a life that's good for yourself, but when whoever you come in contact, are you empowering them? Are you inspiring them to be a better version of themselves and to make the world a better place? And I guess like the biggest reason why like I pulled out of the manosphere is because I realized that like I was starting to have a lot of derogatory thoughts towards women, and that's obviously, I guess, a lot of derogatory thoughts towards women, and that was obviously not a good place to be. So that's my final thing that I'll say about, I guess, the topics for today to leave y'all with.
Yeah. And you want to say something final?
Yeah, sure. I mean, huge respect for being able to pull out. Wow, that sounds rough.
Yeah, that sounded
you know what I mean. Philosophically.
I don't know if I do.
But yeah, I definitely agree with that, We're all just here trying to find our own path to walk, and I think it sounds very heal the worldy, but like we should all strive to like help each other out at the end of the day.
And on that note, if you enjoyed the content, leave a nice constructive or a positive comment. If you didn't like the content, leave a constructive comment. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And please leave a like regardless of whether you liked it or not. Ambitious of me to ask, but I'm going to do it. And if you like watching the podcast and would like to be on it, just hit me up on Instagram. I'm always looking for potential guests. We talk about a variety of college-related topics and self-improvement-related topics. And it's always fun. I think every guest has enjoyed being on the podcast so far. It's definitely gotten you out of your comfort zone. I'd say most people out of their comfort zone, because not a lot of people have done anything like this. And even as the host, like I feel like, this is getting the whole thing, but I feel like I'm growing as a person because I'm doing this little podcast. I'm definitely learning more about myself, learning more about like what I actually believe. And I think there's value in that. So with that, I'll leave you guys to it. Hope you enjoyed the content, and take care.